Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. So today I'm coming to you with a much requested recommendation video. So a few weeks ago I did a recommendation video of adult book recs for YA readers. So anyone who regularly reads young adult books, they would probably enjoy some of the adult books that I recommended in that video. So a lot of you asked for the reverse of that, which is YA book recs for adult readers or people who don't usually read YA. So obviously I had to come through for you guys, and I have a bunch of books that I want to recommend today. A lot of these are my favorites. A lot of these are like classics among the category, and I just wanted to share them with you today. So I have like sort of three categories. So the first is like classics in YA that I think you should definitely pick up, and then the second is some contemporary that I think is really great, and then the third is just a bunch of sci-fi fantasy because that's mostly what I read. But most of these follow characters that are slightly older in the YA category, or they're not necessarily in a high school situation but dealing with some more like larger problems. And a lot of these I feel like could cross over into the adult space if they were just put in a different part of the bookstore. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy this video and that you find some great recs to pick up. And without further ado, let's just jump right in. Alright, so for the first few books, the YA classics that I want you guys to pick up, or I would recommend picking up if you're getting into YA, these ones are really well known, so I'm not going to talk about them too much. So the first one is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. The reason I'm recommending this one is because I feel like there's been such a like cultural moment around this book. It, really tied in with the BLM movement, and I feel like so many of us YA readers have read this and know the importance of it, and I feel like it really speaks to the activism that a lot of like Gen Z is just really taking up right now. And so I absolutely love this book just on its own, regardless of the kind of social commentary that it gives, but I do highly recommend it if you are getting into YA. It just speaks to, the versatility of what YA can do, and I love that about it, and I just love Angie Thomas as a human, and I love all of her books. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite, and I just love Star as a character and the bond that she has with her family, but also just like the journey she goes through dealing with this very difficult situation and, rising up by the end. On a very similar note of empowerment, I would definitely recommend the very YA classic of The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. It's one of the books that started the boom of YA, and I definitely think it captures the voice of YA also, and that idea of everything feeling very immediate and, very critical at this particular moment in time that a lot of teens kind of feel. But it also, similar to, The Hate U Give, has some very strong social commentary and takes place in a dystopian world that could very well be our own world very far in the future. And so I think it's very interesting for that reason, and I do think that it's one of those like really devourable reads that you can just kind of pick up. And I think for such a short and quick book, it really packs a punch, and the entire series has been such a cultural like moment also in, the 2010s, and I feel like for that reason you should definitely pick it up. Even if you have seen the movies, definitely go check out the book. And then the last kind of YA classic that I want to recommend is sort of an author, but also a specific series of hers. So the series that I want to recommend is The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare, but I also think I want to recommend Cassandra Clare as an author. I think she's super great, and she has a whole universe of books, around this idea of shadow hunters who fight demons and can see into like the shadow realm. But The Infernal Devices is probably my favorite of all of her series, and the reason I think that this one specifically will appeal to adult readers is because it is historical. It's set in the 1800s in London, but it also features a very mature kind of romance in it. It is a bit of a love triangle, but Cassandra Clare deals with it in such an interesting and like refreshing way in this series that I just absolutely loved. And by the end, you just love all the characters so much. And I think that's one of her like strong qualities, is just making you love her characters. All right, now on to some more recent releases, and I have a couple contemporaries to start. So the first one is Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi, and I honestly think that any Mary H.K. Choi book would be really good for adult readers, but this one in specific, I recently finished it and thought it was just so phenomenal. This one does deal with characters that are slightly older on the YA spectrum, and they are about like college age and a little bit older. So it follows our main character Jane, who I think is a junior in college, and also her sister June, who is a few years older than her, I think about 3, so she's out of college. So these characters are a little bit older, and they're both in New York City, and they're both kind of dealing with their own personal demons, but this book really focuses on the sister relationship that they have, and also like how that expands to their family, and also the relationship that both of them have to their identity as Asian Americans, and their personal relationships to their own bodies. This does have some triggers for like eating disorders, so just be careful of that. But I think that this was just so well done, and Mary H.K. Choi's writing is just so crisp and just really captures each character in a really like perfect way. She has a way of mentioning just a few small details about a character that really tell you so much about them. And I think she just makes New York and these characters just come alive off the page. On a similar note of incredible writing, I want to recommend Anna K by Jenny Lee. I absolutely loved the writing in this book because it's like so lyrical and also so bold. It has a way of sort of taking this omniscient third person narrator that delves into the lives of all of these teens in this upper class New York high society who all have too much money and are in a bit of this Gossip Girl situation. And so you're hearing all of this like gossip and like relationship makeups and breakups, but not in a super like tacky way. It feels a lot like a classic in a way, and that's partly due to the fact that it is inspired and like sort of a retelling of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So if you're into classics in any way, I definitely recommend picking this one up because I feel like it captures the vibe of a classic while also putting it in a modern day setting. I also just really love the characters in this book. They are all so super flawed, and they are a little bit on the older side. Like they're in high school, but they feel older. And so for that reason, I feel like it's still a lot of fun to read about them. All right, now I'm going to get into some full-on fantasy book recs. But the first one that I want to recommend is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. And I absolutely love this book because it is just so beautifully written. Like this is another like theme, just beautiful writing. But this is the most like unique of Marie Lu's books. I feel like I love all of her books, but a lot of them do feel very YA. But this one is definitely a lot different from her usual thing. This is actually a bit of a like historical fantasy in the sense that it actually follows Mozart and his sister Nanowrimo and their kind of life growing up and, you know, becoming adults, but with this fantasy element thrown in that hinges on these stories that the actual like historical Mozart and his sister told to each other about this mysterious kingdom of Back. And so it's this like magical place that they used to tell stories about in their carriage rides. And so Marie Lu kind of plucks this idea from history and reimagines it in this book. And so you are getting kind of the fantastical, but also the historical. But you're also getting a sense of Nanowrimo's story and how history has sort of looked over her because she was a woman, and how her brother's fame and his talent was, you know, always bolstered because he was a man. And it's just such an interesting kind of tale to read about, and I absolutely loved it. It's just so beautifully written, and by the end you're just like left with this like feeling like at the end of like a concert when you just like don't want to speak, you don't want to fill that silence because everything before that was just so beautiful. So yeah, it's a wonderful book, highly recommend. Another book with some wonderful writing. This one is a full-on fantasy, like in another world, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. If you've ever read a Laini Taylor book, then you know she has just beautiful writing. It's just like so poetic and lyrical, and you just like fall into the magic of it. And this one is no different. It is set in a fantasy world, and it follows our main character Laszlo, who is this like orphan who has grown up in this like library in a monastery, and he's grown up on these stories of the mythic lost city of Weep. And so Weep is not its actual name, that's just the name it was given after its name was stolen by some magic. And so he's always been like curious about this place and wanting to go there but not knowing how. And when a delegation from that city comes to his town looking for some experts to help them deal with a problem in their city, he ends up going along to the city. And I don't really want to mention more about the plot other than that, because I definitely think this is one of those books that you need to just go into without knowing much and you will just be blown away. But this deals a lot with the dreams. There's a really beautiful romance in it, and there's also some really heavy themes of like war and how like conquering nations kind of take advantage of the conquered, and it's just so interesting. And there are like gods in this book and like magical powers, and it is just honestly just the coolest thing ever, and you will just be swept away by this book. All right, the next book that I want to recommend is one that I read last year and absolutely loved, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Dion. And never have I seen a book that's so well kind of wraps a person's identity into the story and how it sort of unfolds. This is a bit like The Mortal Instruments in the sense that it, you know, has a magical world on the surface of the real world. It follows our main character, Bree, whose mother has recently died, and she is going off to this like pre-college program for high schoolers at this university. And what she finds there is that there is this secret society called Legendborn who have connections to the kind of legend of King Arthur. And so in this world, you know, the legend of King Arthur is real, real, and there are people who are like his sires and squires and, you know, this whole lineage of people who have descended from him and his knights, and they have built the system of fighting off, you know, demonic presences in the world. And so our main character sort of gets swept up in this secret society because she feels that they might have more answers to what happened to her mother. But what I loved about this book is that, you know, it really ties Bree's identity as like a Black woman living in America to the story, and also just like the history behind her lineage, and also ties the magic into that as well. And it's one of those books that you kind of need to read to really understand all of the nuances and amazing qualities that it has, but I think it was just so well done and so well researched as well, and I'm so excited to see where it's going to go in the later books as well, because it is going to be a series, and this is just the first book. Alright, we're on to the second last book of this recommendation video, and this one also deals with a bit of history, and that is The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. This is probably my favorite of Roshni Chokshi's books. This is actually set in the 1800s, I think, and the first one is set in Paris, but the subsequent books are set in like different locations, which is super cool. But I love the series because it deals with a larger cast of characters with revolving narrators, and they are all from very different backgrounds, and this is one of the most diverse books I've ever seen. But what I also love about it is that it really connects their identities to their historical past and how these characters are really outsiders in the society that they live in and dealing with the effects of colonization during this era. And it's just super, super interesting in that way. But it also has a bit of magic as well, and it basically starts with one of our main characters, Severin, kind of gathering up his friends who all have certain skills and certain abilities to go and steal this special artifact for this ancient organization called the Order of Babel that has like these lineages of families based upon these magical artifacts that they have stolen from different places throughout history. I also just really love the characters in this book. They all are so unique and have their own struggles, but also like their relationships with each other are just so sweet, and I love seeing them develop in very interesting and exciting ways throughout the series. Alright, and then this last book is a pretty obvious one. A lot of people on BookTube love it, but I think it's one that has a really great crossover potential, and it reminds me of a lot of adult fantasies as well, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I have shoved this at all of my friends in real life, and a bunch of them don't really read or, you know, aren't really into YA, but they picked this up and absolutely loved it. And I think that's just a testament to the writing and how it's just like a really immersive story that you can just jump into. But this basically follows six outcasts who kind of come together to pull off this fantasy heist, and they are all like thugs and thieves in this merchant city called Kerch in this fantasy world, and they all kind of come together in a very begrudging way to pull off this heist, and they're all in it for the money, but they kind of form a larger bond by the end, and I love it. It is so much fun. Cannot wait for the Netflix adaptation of Shadow and Bone and also this book. But yeah, I think it's like a fun fantasy read that you can definitely just jump into and have no regrets. Alright, but those are all the books that I wanted to recommend today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that if you are an adult reader or someone who's new to reading, you found some really great YA book recs to pick up. I think YA is such a great, you know, category, and there are so many wonderful books just popping up every day, and I'm just so excited by all of them, and I cannot wait to continue like reading a lot of YA. I will never give up on YA because it just has my entire heart. But so excited for more of you to pick up YA, and I hope you will let me know if you are excited about any of these books or if you have read any of them and what you thought of them, and if there are any YA book recs that you would like to recommend to anyone else watching this video, also leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video, so please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!